Welcome back everyone to another Voiceflow tutorial video. This is episode 4 of our 10-part series where you are going to learn how to be a Voiceflow master. In this episode we are going to be going over flows and commands. Now the best way to think about flows and commands is manipulating the structure of your project. So if you have a very large and complex skill or a Google action, you may have a ton of blocks on your canvas. And this can get a little unruly and really disorganized, and before long you'll be wishing that you were able to compartmentalize things and sort of keep them in their own separate containers. And so that's what flows are. They allow you to bunch up a whole bunch of blocks, put them into one block that is accessed almost like a file. So flows are very much like a file system. So to access your project's structure with all of your flows, you want to go into the left toolbar and click the project button. And here you'll see your project's structure is brought up. And so you can see here we have the home flow, which is the main flow of your project. We also have some subflows, so help command and stop command. And as you can see, you can click on these and actually access them and then be able to add things, manipulate them, and actually build it out. Now you'll know you're in a subflow when you'll have this little home icon pop up here, and you can click that and you can always go back to the home flow. And at the bottom of your screen, around here, you'll see that the subflow name will pop up, and you'll be able to then change the name, copy it, delete it, and manipulate that subflow from there. So that's a good way to know if you're in a subflow, is this bottom icon and this home button. So let's actually talk about a good use case for flows. A really good use case is if you're building an interactive entertainment, Alexa skill or Google action. Mute my device there. You may want to have different stories all within the same project. Now, rather than having hundreds of blocks all on the same canvas, you can actually start to break it up by stories and then even go further and break it up by chapters within stories. And so let's actually build something very basic just like that. We're going to ask the user which story they would like or which chapter they would like, and then depending on what the user says, they will go into a different flow. So let's say, welcome, would you like a children's story or a story for adults? Now, depending on what the user says here, we will navigate them into a different flow. So I can add two choices. I can add children's, and I'm going to add adult story. Okay, so there are two choices here. We're going to want to go into our advanced section and pull out a flow block. So here they are right here, hidden behind my face. Pull these out. I'll pull out two of them. And these are going to hold our two different stories. So on the flow block, let's hook these up. You can actually open them up and you'll see we can either use an existing flow. So for example, if we already had a template or a different piece of functionality that was already existing, so I already have the help and stop commands, we could actually use those and just reuse flows. And this is really valuable when you have large projects where you're reusing a lot of functionality. So for example, if it was like a calculator and you wanted to have a calculator flow used multiple times throughout your project, you could just select and reuse that existing flow off of your list. But in this case, we're going to build an entirely new flow from scratch. So we're going to want to hit create new flow. And there we are. So we're brought in, and in this new flow, we just have our home block. And you'll see on the left here, we have a new flow. And so we can actually rename this. We're going to rename this children's story. Children's story. And you'll see at the bottom there, that is now the name of our subflow. And we can actually start to build out this project. So it might be something like this, like welcome to children's story. And there we go. And then once that ends, it would go back to the home flow. And so you can see on the flow block now, we have children's story as the label, and we have a little button to enter the flow, and that's how you know it's all linked up. And we can go back, and we'll do the exact same thing for the adult story. So we'll pull this in, pull out another speak block, and we'll say adult story. Okay, great. So now I want to rename this to adult story. There we are. Now let's say in our adult story we actually ask the user, welcome to adult story, which chapter would you like? Story, which chapter would you like? We can actually nest more flows within of our initial subflow. So let's have options for chapter 1 and chapter 2. Chapter 1 is a synonym, and chapter 2 and 2 as a synonym. Great. So now we can actually drag in 2 more flows here. Connect these up, and we'll create them. So this one will be called chapter 1. Right here, chapter 1. Go back to adult story and create this one, and we'll call this one chapter 2. There you go. So now on our project structure, you can see we have in our home flow, we have the option for 2 different stories, the children's story and the adult story. And within the adult story, we can even nest further and have flows for each specific chapter. And let's say, for example, we built a really good chapter 1 that we might want to use elsewhere. We can actually copy this flow, and we can use this throughout other parts of our project. So let's say, for example, if we wanted to go through chapter 1 twice in a row, we could pull out a flow block here, and we could reuse that copy. And so now, you'll see we have chapter 1 copy is also within adult story. And there it is right there. And so that's how you can start to build out a project structure using flows. Now you might be wondering what the stop and help commands are right here on the home block. Well, the best way to think about commands is they are flows where they're self-contained, and rather than how a normal flow works, where once this children's story flow is done and it's hit the last block and there's nothing else left, it's going to come out of this port. It's going to continue on with the navigation of the conversation. A command is actually going to go right back to where the user was in the skill. So if we enter the, let's say the help command right here, if the user at any time within your Alexa skill or Google action says the name of this command, so for example help or stop, it is going to come into this flow, do this flow. So it might say, for example, like this is me helping you, and wherever that user was in their project, they're going to come right back to that point. And so why this is really useful is it allows you to do things like, for example, checking your score. In an interactive quiz game, you might want to give the user the option at any point to say, Alexa, check my score. So you might have a command for that, and so let's actually create one. So we could create an intent, and we'll get into intents in a future video. I believe it's the next one, so if you don't know what these are, don't worry. As we'll say score check. I'll say check my score. Score please. And then we'll hook this up to score. And we'll create a flow for it. So if the user says check my score at any point, they're going to come into this flow. We can say your score is, and we'll have a score variable we'll set up hopefully. Give them their score, and then once this is done, it hits the last block and it's not connected to anything. No matter where the user was in the skill, they'll be brought right back. And so that's really useful in that it's not like a flow where it has to flow in and it will continue on with an outbound port like this. It will actually be able to go right back to wherever the user was in the project. So hopefully that was a good overlook of flows and commands. They are the most complex thing in Voiceflow and sort of in voice development in general. So if you have any issues, definitely just try playing around with them for yourself, and I'll also add supplemental documentation below in the description of this video so that you can check out some more written tutorials, because once you start to get the hang of commands and flows, they are incredibly powerful. So just as one final overview, a flow is used to nest different pieces of functionality within your project. It's used like a file system to break it up so you can have multiple blocks in different sort of files and compartments. And a command is a flow where it's not going to continue on with the conversation. It's going to go do something and then come right back. So a normal flow will continue on with the conversation. It'll go do something and continue on. A command will go enter a flow, do something, and then come right back to where the user was. And so those are the two differences. Within every flow, you can have separate commands. So here we are in the stop command. I can actually add commands in that command. In children's story, for example, maybe we don't have a scoring system, but maybe we have what's the name of this book. You could actually add a command to handle that. And so this allows users to ask a quick question, but not take them out of the normal flow and allow them to go right back to where they were in the conversation with your project. Again, lots of supplemental documentation below this video. Be sure to check it out. Email us if you have any questions, and the system will continually get better and easier as we go forward. All right, so in the next couple of videos, we're going to talk about cross-platform development, as well as some other advanced topics to help you add even more power and personalization to your projects. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.